Tuesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a great day out there today. Lots to get to in a little bit, but we're going to start right away with Vikings over the Bears. 30-12 on Monday Night Football. Final score, very satisfying. The way they got there, maybe not as satisfying. It wasn't like a dominant win. It wasn't a particularly efficient win, but it also never really felt like it was in doubt, nor did it feel like they were, taking the Bears lightly, right? I felt like the effort, the focus was there from the beginning. It's just that the Vikings are a good but imperfect team. They're a flawed team in some regards, and those flaws showed up in this game in terms of letting the Bears run early. I thought the Bears kind of went away from the run. They could have had more success there if they had stuck with it. Caleb Williams, the Bears just made a lot of Bears plays that really turned this game. I mean, Bears are driving on the second time they get the ball. First time the Vikings stop them on a 4th and short, kind of a weird decision, weird play call where they try to run wide. Don't make it. I think they could have had more success, maybe just off tackle or something simple. Vikings get a field goal out of that stop. Bears come down, move the ball the second time, get into field goal range again, and then wind up strip sack of Caleb Williams on a 3rd down rush. I think it was Jonathan Grenard that got him that time. So, players making plays on big downs, right? Like 4th down. I think I read the Vikings are the best 4th down defense in the NFL, and that's huge. I mean, you don't get much bigger than 4th downs, like having success, especially stopping teams in those kind of critical moments, not even just like end-of-game desperation moments, like those kind of 50-50 judgment calls where a team is like, hey, we feel like it's worth it to go for it here, and then they stop them, flips field position, flips momentum. They're very good, have been very good all season in those spots, and I think that's the thing that's probably the most impressive about the Vikings from start to finish this season is how good they've been in those most meaningful downs, the weighty downs, like Kevin O'Connell likes to say. They've been very good in those situations, and that 4th down stat is certainly an indicator of that. Yeah, I know they gave up a 4th down touchdown pass kind of in garbage time later. The Vikings essentially ran out the clock or close to it after that, got a field goal, kind of put the game away at 30-12. It was already pretty much put away, but they extended that drive with a couple first downs. So yeah, that 4th down the Bears converted. I wasn't really too worried about that. It was the more meaningful ones that they stopped them on earlier in the game that really turned this thing. Wasn't the greatest Sam Darnold game. He was fine. He missed a couple throws. Justin Jefferson had a pretty significant drop, although he made some pretty good catches as well. 24 of 40 for Darnold kind of expresses that he just wasn't quite as accurate as he has been. He missed a couple windows where Jefferson was open over the middle, had to throw the ball away sometimes. I thought he played a smart game, but probably not his best game. And there was the interception. That was a 4th down play, just kind of like, hey, the play got blown up, throw it up for grabs just in case you can make a miracle play and extend the drive. So I wasn't as worried about that. He put a couple up for grabs that could have been picked, that weren't picked. That was a little bit lucky. He's gotten away with some throws like that. But overall, I was okay with Sam Darnold's game. It was certainly not his best game, not his worst game. Did enough for them to win. I was probably more impressed with the running game. Nothing came necessarily easy, but 29 carries for 114 yards. I think they would take that most weeks. Aaron Jones, 18 for 86. Cam Akers, 10 for 24, but that was more when the Bears knew they were going to run, so that was a little bit tougher sledding. Both of them with short touchdown runs. Seems like they may have found something in the run game with, I think it was Johnny Munt, they put in short motion off to the right and have him kind of dive forward, extra blocker, momentum off right tackle. I don't know if they can keep running that play over and over again if teams are going to start defending it a certain way. Maybe there's some play action off of it that they can run in subsequent games, but they found success with that play twice. Once with Aaron Jones was a walk-in, once with Cam Akers, who had to struggle a little bit more to get it in, but did get it in. This has been a bad team on short yardage goal line running situations, so to see them find a play where they have success, that is a big deal because you got to cash in when you're down there. And the Bears obviously didn't, right? That was another momentum play. Vikings are up 13-0 early in the second half. Bears have a chance to get back in it, though. It's like it's only 13-0, even though the Bears haven't done anything on offense really, or haven't been able to finish drives, extend drives. They get it down to the 1. They bring in a tackle eligible basically to play fullback. He forgets to report. They were in the end zone easily, but it gets called back 5 yards. They get another play where they get another penalty. All of a sudden, they're backed up. They don't get it in the end zone. They have to kick a field goal. 13-3 is a lot different than 13-7. 13-7 starts to make you think, okay, Bears have momentum. Vikings just took momentum right back at that point. Went and got a touchdown, I believe, on the very next drive. 20-3 at that point. So there you go. That was kind of the ball game right there. Bears got another field goal later, again, where they kind of messed around, couldn't get it into the end zone. Couldn't really get it in the end zone until it was too late. I don't know if the Vikings learned from the last game against Caleb Williams, but they sure seemed like they had a better plan for him to contain him. He still got away a few times, didn't really scramble a whole lot, only had 4 carries for 3 yards, but he did kind of get away to throw passes, but didn't really do the damage that he did that last time out with his shiftiness. Didn't make plays in broken off scripted stuff nearly as much. Held him to 18 of 31, 191 and a touchdown, but again, that costly fumble. His total QBR was only 25.3. I mean, the Vikings really did a nice job containing him. He did not play well. That's a tough one for the Bears because it seemed like he was ascending, and then these last couple of weeks against the 49ers and the Vikings, he has not been the same quarterback that he looked like he was kind of in the middle of the season when the coordinator change. You had the kind of the change in style. Seems like teams are starting to figure that shift out. So now what you have is the Vikings at of course 12-2, tied for the division lead with the Lions, tied for the conference lead with the Lions and the Eagles. And the way it looks right now, if you do all the tiebreaker math, if the Vikings win out, they're going to win the division because Detroit's on their schedule. If they beat Seattle, Green Bay, and Detroit in the next 3 weeks, and those are all teams that are in playoff position right now or, likely to be in the playoffs, Green Bay and Detroit. Green Bay almost certainly, Detroit certainly going to be in the playoffs, Seattle still in the mix for a wild card or the division title. It's going to be tough, but if they win all 3 of those games, they will win the division, and they will almost certainly also win the NFC and get that number 1 seed. Now, there's still a strength of victory is what it's going to come down to if both them and Philadelphia win out. They'll both be 15-2. They'll both have same record, same conference record, same record against common opponents. It would come down to strength of victory, and I think the Vikings have a tougher schedule right now. So right now, I think they're up like 6 or 7 games in the strength of victory column. Now, of course, that can change, right? Because strength of victory is determined by the winning percentages of the teams you've beaten. If some of those teams pull upsets later in the season, that can shift. But right now, it's looking like the Vikings definitely have a pretty significant upper hand in the tiebreaker against the Eagles. And of course, the Vikings and Lions, that would be a different story. But the Vikings having that opportunity to have that number 1 seed, to win out, to probably have that number 1 seed is huge, right? Like that's not to say they're going to get it. Like they definitely have the hardest schedule of those 3 remaining teams in terms of locking up that division title and that number 1 seed, because Detroit has Chicago and the 49ers outside of the Vikings. And the 49ers, you could say, maybe give them a game playing for pride. They're pretty much out of the playoff race, but a better team than probably their record indicates having a disappointing season. I think the Eagles have some pretty easy games. They play the Cowboys, the Giants. Their schedule is not all that tough. Green Bay probably not a factor in the division race. They're 2 games back of both those teams. They've got some tiebreaker problems because of division losses. They've lost to Detroit twice. They've already lost to the Vikings once. So I think unless some total collapse happens or there's a tie somewhere along the way, I think the Packers are pretty much locked into being a wild card, likely the 6th seed, although that's still to be determined based on how things finish up. The Packers certainly could jump the Vikings or the Lions depending on what happens these last few weeks. But the long story short is the Vikings are in much better position now going into these last 3 games. They know that if they win out, now they're not in control of winning, but they are in control of if they win, if those outcomes happen, they will be the NFC North winner and almost certainly the number 1 seed. And remember, there's only one bye now. It used to be the 1 and the 2 got a bye. Now it's just 1 because they went to the 7-team format, and 1 gets a bye, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5 in the first round. So it's a big deal, a much bigger deal now to get that 1 seed than it used to be. The 2 seed used to have a lot more meaning. You get that bye, then you get a home game the next round. You win 1 home game, you're in the NFC title game if you were the 2 seed before. Now you got to win a couple of times to get there. Risk injury, risk upset, things like that. So this is a big deal. It's going to be a tough road no matter what. Winning these games won't be easy. The Seahawks, like Royce and I talked about on Monday, have some problems right now, especially depending on Geno Smith's health. He couldn't finish that game against the Packers with a leg injury. We'll see if he's good to go for the Vikings game. If he can't, Sam Howell did not look good against Green Bay, but that game again is in Seattle. That will be a challenge no matter what. Then they got to play the Packers after that. Then that Week 18 game in Detroit. Again, that Packers game is here. Vikings already beat the Packers once earlier this season. Jordan Love was kind of coming off an injury, caught them at a good time, had a huge first half, and then hung on in that second half to win that game. So we'll see where it all winds up at. Man, they are in such better position right now than they were at the start of the week. The 1 seed in a bye is still not a long shot, but it is a far less than 50-50 proposition because of their schedule, because the Lions are still a good team, even if their defense is in shambles right now. But the opportunity, the window is open for the Vikings right now in a way that it just was not open before. Okay, guys, you are in for a treat now. This might be the longest episode of Daily Delivery in recorded history. Jeff Day from the Star Tribune is going to join me here in just a minute. We had a two-part interview, one to talk about his excellent, amazing story on Mya Hooten, the Gophers gymnast, her journey, her story. We went deep on that. And then anytime Jeff and I get together, we can't help it. We got to talk Timberwolves. We revisited the Karl-Anthony Towns trade with the Knicks game coming up on Thursday. We revisited how the season is going, things like that. So it's long, but I promise you it is worth your while once I bring in Jeff Day here right now. I'm very happy to be joined by Jeff Day of the Star Tribune, multiple-time guest on this podcast, less frequently lately, though, because Jeff has moved to the news side of the Star Tribune out of the sports section. What's that, 6 months ago or so?
Yeah, 5 months ago.
So doing great work, covering a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of court stuff is primarily your duty now. And I find myself reading a lot of your stuff now just because you tend to find the interesting. I can almost tell sometimes when I click on a headline, like I bet that's Jeff Day.
Well, it's an endlessly fascinating beat.
Yes.
I mean, that's just so the nature of it, I think, lends itself to interesting stories, and then we try to hunt it out. And I'm learning as I go, obviously. And I think we maybe talked about this before,
Yeah.
Sports is news.
Oh, yeah.
And my line has always been from the court to the courts. And that's how I feel about it.
Yes.
That, in fact, sports reporting is such a breaking news environment that it lends itself well to this world that I'm in now. But, still an avid reader, always.
Yes.
And Daily D fan before
Thank you.
I was, what's that, long time fan, first time.
Long time listener, first time caller,
guest,
I think. Yeah.
Multi-time
Yeah,
guest.
different.
But anyway, yes. But very happy to be back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back because you had a sports story. It was online late last week. It was in the Sunday print section, if I'm not mistaken, on Gophers gymnast Mya Hooten. And tremendous story, something you've been working on for a long time, obviously, because this predates your move to the new beat. So maybe I'm just going to open this up. I loved the story. A lot of people did. A tremendous read. How did this come about? How did you kind of get into being able to tell this story?
Well, so this was a months-long process to report this story. It started with Mya,
right?
And it started with a connection I have at the U of M, E.J. Stevens, who is just a wonderful media liaison. He's a comms person for the volleyball team. That's how I got to know him.
Oh, sure.
And he said, there's an interesting story on the gymnastics team. Now, I knew Mya Hooten. I knew of Mya Hooten.
Right. She's really good.
Yes.
Yes.
I think she's, one of easily the most visible athletes that the U has. But it was this notion of there's a story behind the story.
Yeah.
And so I first started by just going and watching her at summer practice. And at the time I was reporting on the U.S. gymnastics trials.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was it was an interesting meeting point because I'm learning about gymnastics. I'm learning about how gymnasts are cultivated, the history of gymnastics in Minnesota, all these club teams, all of this stuff. But then I'm also starting to learn a little bit about Mya, who's this college gymnast of just great notoriety, and people really love watching her. And I could tell immediately that she is just a vibrant personality.
Okay.
I mean, the kind of person who you look at and you're like, wow, she radiates a kind of energy that you can see where the fan attraction to her comes from. And what the U has said is that she especially connects with young girls. They pack in to watch her perform. And anyway, so it started by getting to know her coaches at the U. And oddly enough, a lot of the reporting that I did at the U didn't make the story, despite how open and awesome her coaches were about explaining her career there. And that's because once Mya felt comfortable enough to share family contacts, we start building out this story of her past.
Right.
And it's like the thing that was fascinating to me was that, to me, this is a story about parents, and it's also a story about the hard work that creates any individual.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
You look at Mya and you see this really composed, put together, intelligent, interesting, and a world-class athlete.
Right.
And it can you see people like that, I think, at times, and you go, well, it's like you were born for this.
Like you've always had it figured out.
Exactly. It's always been this thing. And I think that's especially true in an era where athletes are presented to us that way a lot of the times.
Yes.
And once I started learning about the shading of her life and what it took for her to become that, it became more and more and more interesting. And, for people who haven't read the story, there's Mya, and then there are her biological parents, Carrie Conroy and Phil Hooten, and then there is this host family that took on a legal guardianship for a period of time. Then they're the Zires. And then in the middle of all of that is a coach named Brian Howe, who runs a club named Classic Gymnastics in Chanhassen.
Okay.
And all of them, and then, this academic advisor named Chris Cords at the U, who's briefly in the story but really should be a story all of his own, and her coaches at the U. It's all these people working together because when Mya was a junior in high school, her academic performance was lacking so dramatically that Jenny Hansen, the Gophers coach, had to tell her and her biological mother and all these people around her that her scholarship was about to disappear.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the story starts, is this notion of a star athlete who was really in a place where her life could go one of two ways.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of people came together to help her point her life in the right direction. Then she took control of that and started creating her career. So to me, it's like a family story, and it's a story of people. Every one of these adults were some of the most lovely people to talk to, and it's one of these things where there's a lot of pain in this story.
Yeah.
Because when you have two biological parents whose daughter is basically in a position of worry.
Yeah.
And especially her mom is kind of feeling this thing of, I don't know what to do exactly to help her.
Yeah.
And you're going to release some control of your parenting.
Yeah.
I think it's a super emotional place.
Oh, yes.
So I can't
hard.
tell. Yeah, it's a tricky thing right now, and as we're talking about, because it's a long story. So
course,
I'm trying to give your listeners like an insight into, again, the story is about, in my opinion, the bulk of the story is about Mya at this intersection of her life where she's needing to make personal changes as a young person, as a junior in high school, to get herself academically eligible. And in order to do that, her parents had to release their guardianship of her so that she could find herself in a better position to both stay excelling in the gym, but to get her academics in order. And there's all kinds of ins and outs to that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But I think it's, Her mother at the time was a single mother.
Yeah.
3 kids at home. And Mya was doing all this time in the gym because when you're a really good gymnast, as any athlete at that age, it's really good.
But especially gymnastics.
Yes.
Like there is a level of training that...
It's year round,
right,
all the time. So she's going to school, then she's going to club practice most of the time, and then high school practice at times. But then coming home, and her mom would work nights. So she would get home. She had an older brother and then 2 younger siblings. So let me rephrase that. That's 4 children at home total, right?
Right.
The mom's working nights as a bartender. She has a family that's deep in the restaurant game.
Yep.
So she knew restaurant life her whole life. It's what she knew. But that meant she's working nights. So Mya's coming home. She's helping with the kids. She's got the older brother that's helping too. And she's, as she explained it, she's exhausted. It's like when you're talking about school.
Mentally and physically.
Yes, gym, and then helping at home and also dealing with your own life.
Right.
God knows also just your personal life as a high school junior.
Yeah.
It becomes the space where she starts struggling.
Yeah.
Her mother and father had divorced a couple of years prior to the scholarship situation.
Got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So the dad, they share custody, but the mother has physical custody.
Got it.
So it's not like the dad's out of her life.
Right.
But the mother has physical custody. He is working to rebuild his life in the wake of the divorce. Both parents are.
Yep.
He's working 2 jobs. He, talked a lot about the notion of having to come to accept his role as a parent in this place and time.
Yeah.
Not easy. And so you have this kind of dynamic where parents are trying. I think they're all, finances become the focus. It's like, I need to provide for my kids.
Well, I mean, if you don't start there, if you don't have that taken care of, everything else can fall apart.
Yes, exactly. So they're working hard to do that. But in that, it's like some of the dynamics, I think, of Mya's academics start to slip, and nobody has a good handle on that. And that's where sort of a bunch of things get activated that are outside of even the parents. It starts with this coach, like I said, Brian Howe, and you meet him, and some coaches are made to coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's a club coach, right?
He's a club, but he coaches. I think as I understand it, he has multiple sports that he works with, and it's like kind of a small industry that he has built of club sports in the metro and also down in Iowa. It's like he's a guy who has he just believes in this world. And I've met a lot of club coaches in my sports reporting. He is a guy who I sat down with him and I was just like, you're an archetype.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
right, yeah.
He just is a coach. And what was fascinating about him was he had a view of Mya from that time that was just clear-eyed.
Yeah.
And part of that is because he was raised by a single mother.
Okay.
So he really identified with her story.
Okay.
He also had a coach who changed his life.
Okay.
And so I think he, as a person, likes to try to be that for others. It's part of his. It's part of his. Identifying characteristics as a human being. So he sees Mya, but he also knows about Mya. Mya, at this point, when he came to her gym, she was like well known throughout the Twin Cities as this phenomenal young gymnast. But as he refers to her in the story, he says she was a pain. There's a reason that she was changing gyms. He said she had a personality that could be a little egotistic. It's like you're really good and you know it.
Right.
He takes a risk on her and says, I'm going to give you a chance to come into the club and start working. He sees a lot of great benefits in having her there. He sees her start growing as a person. But then this academic information gets brought to him. And this is after they had been working together, I think, for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And so in this space of the Gophers coming and saying she's going to be academically ineligible, her parents are feeling desperate.
Yeah.
And he becomes kind of this focal point of a person who can conceptually think about how can we make this better in a way that they might not. Now, even Mya said, a coach can't take on an athlete. There's safe sport and all these rules. It's like it's just not a possible. There might have been a time back in the 80s and where the coach just
but
brings
not now.
Not now. So he starts thinking about a host family.
Okay.
And his mind is sort of processing. And everybody involved said that this was an overwhelming time for all of them.
It's gotta be.
It's like they because I think they all knew that she was a special person.
Yeah.
And of course her parents know that, but I think people even on the outside looking at her could see this. Jenny Hansen talked about, this is the Gophers gymnastics coach, said when she first saw her at a club meet, it's like that thing where the room narrows and you just see somebody and you go, there's something special here. Not just her talent, but she talked about her just like this thing where you cannot take your eyes off of this athlete. So the club coach, Brian Howe, they host a big like club week, which I guess is a big deal in club gymnastics where it's like coaches are coming to watch athletes. It's all this stuff. And at the end of it, he takes everybody out for drinks, appetizers. We're having a good time. Club parents.
Yeah.
This Sarah Zier walks up to him and just offhandedly is like communicating with him about how was the week? Like, what'd you think about how'd club week go, this and that?
Yeah.
And he proceeds to tell her that it didn't really matter how the week went because he couldn't stop thinking about what to do about Mya Hooten.
Yeah.
And Sarah knew Mya because everybody knew Mya because Mya was like this little, this star at the club.
Sure.
But she didn't know her. She had a daughter who trained there who was, I think, 3 years younger than Mya. So, at that age, 3 years is a pretty wide gap. There's no overlap.
Of course.
And anyway, it's such a meandering story, but I think it's like this is the point where the Ziers, especially Sarah, was looking for something in her life. It's like she had been kind of – it's like that cosmos things, the things that are swirling in a person's life, and then something from the outside comes in. And when Brian said this thing about not knowing what to do with Mya – and saying, we're looking for a host family.
Yeah.
She said in that moment, she knew instantaneously.
It's like, that's us.
It's us.
Yeah.
Even though there had never been a discussion in their family about, do we want to be a host family?
Right.
Should we bring another kid? Like, it wasn't something that was planned. It's just she knew in that moment that it was like a lightning bolt. Her husband was less sure. But ultimately, they make this decision that we're going to bring this girl into our home.
Yeah.
And in that moment, there's a lot of positives because things start moving in that direction. The second they start moving in that direction, the biological parents, Phil and Carrie, both, even though they're not married, they both start to feel all kinds of, I don't know what you'd call it, not necessarily just negative, but just emotions about this. Second guessing themselves. Phil had resentment over his role in this.
Sure.
He thought that she should have came and lived with him.
Okay.
He swallowed some of that because he felt like, well, if this, I think there's this element of this coach feeling like this is a situation where because of where the Ziers lived, they lived really close to where his club was.
Okay.
Okay, so let's trim that like commute time between school and club gymnastics. And the Ziers were just willing to take her on in a way that felt like it could position her well. And Mya started to want it.
Okay.
I think that was part of it too, probably the biggest part.
Okay.
It's like she starts saying that this feels like, I think she's nervous about losing that scholarship.
Yeah.
She's nervous about the direction her life is taking. She knows that there might need to be a drastic action in this moment. But there's a big difference between knowing that you need to do that and then doing it.
Of course.
So anyway, I mean, it's just a story where you hit this point where you're going to make a big change and all of that tension builds for these family members. And the two sides do not meet in that moment. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. The host family and the biological family, that does not meet right then.
Doesn't all happen at the same time.
No. In fact, it's more like a ripping apart.
Okay.
Mya stops talking to her mother.
Okay.
The mom does not want her to leave. Once she does, and also Mya's leaving everything she knows.
Yeah.
She's leaving her younger siblings.
Yeah.
She's leaving the house she knows.
Right.
And she did it because she felt it was a necessary thing. But in the wake of that comes, a lot of work over the course of years for these people to come together and build what becomes this really beautiful relationship. But it all starts with pain, anxiety,
of course,
uncertainty, and then they start the work of, okay, what are we going to do now?
Well, and what's fascinating about this story is, like you said, it's about relationships. It's about, big time sports. But there's definitely been, there's stories like this where you have a great athlete who has to endure or overcome something. But usually it's like framed as like, so there's like a tragedy that happens, or there's like something that's like, like just some overwhelming thing. Somebody, a parent dies.
Yes,
like something
exactly.
happens like that, or like there's some sort of like tragedy within the family. That's not what this is. This was like things just kind of like slowly falling apart.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out how to put it back together again.
That's the thing. It's like, to me, when I hear this story, while it seems very intense and personal for them, as an outsider, I'm looking at it going, well, there's nothing crazy unique about this, in that many families need help to raise a child correctly. Now, that might come from an uncle or an aunt or a grandmother or grandfather. It might come from – now, there are also – the Gophers told me this. They're like, we deal with host families a lot, but it's typically a little bit different. But they talk about, especially like in hockey, there's always situations where people are going to live with different families to train this and that. But this was more of a I think it stemmed from a place of hardship in a way, personal hardship, and feeling judgment and things like that, where things that you can't really control, even if everybody is doing it for the right reasons, it doesn't mean it's not painful. And so that was one of the things I loved about talking to all of these individuals, was that it is so easy to like them because they are human. They are just real people living real life. And it just so happens that the person that they helped became this incredible athlete. And
it's thriving.
And
now.
it's thriving. I mean, that's the thing too. It's like when I left this story, I remember thinking, God, I wish everybody had this. I wish everybody had people in there. And I think a lot of people do in some capacity. Great teachers, great coaches. I would call it, like when I was in high school, it's like auxiliary family members, where it's like you're spending so much time with this friend or at this house that those parents kind of take you on and look out for you or things like that. I don't think that what they did is abnormal, but I think for them, the dramatics of it and the tension that it sprang from, which was this thing of, like Carrie Conroy says in the story, did I do a bad job as a mother? How many of us have had that thought?
Oh.
Have I? Yeah, I mean, daily for me?
Daily. Like, did I do the right thing in this moment? Like, I don't know. Like, I think so, but...
yes, I'm trying, but am I doing it perfectly? Absolutely not.
And we're like coaches who remember the losses more than the wins, right?
Absolutely.
Like if we do the right thing 95% of the time, you remember the 5 that you didn't.
And it's like you can sit down across from Carrie Conroy, as I did, and have lunch with her and talk with her about her life and it's like you just see a wonderful person, because that's what she is. She's like one of the warmest people I've ever met. I told her after we got done having lunch, I hugged her. I was like, you're just a natural. And what I mean that's like a natural human. You have real humaneness inside of you. And then Mya's dad is like this. I mean, some people have energy and some people have energy all the time. And he's like a guy, every time I've ever seen or spoken with him, his energy is just right there. He just has a vibrancy to him. And he's funny, and you can tell that he wants the best for the people in his life. But that doesn't make it easy. The Zires are also kind of in an interesting position in this story, in my opinion about it, because how do you bring somebody into your life, start caring for them deeply, and also respect their parents? And what does that look like? And how do you get to that space? And how do you draw proper boundaries?
Of course.
Help the young woman who needs help. Let her live with you. Let her become, as they said to me, they're like, she became a part of our family. And I think that's natural, because if you are trying to do it right, you're going to need to have that element. And Sarah Zier especially, as I understood, as they told me, it's like she became like the coordination queen. It's like we are going to not, I mean, I say micromanage with a lot of respect here. You have some work that needs done on your grades, so here we go. They got a lot of help from Brian Howe. He is, of course, the like MVP of the story underneath it all, because he buys Mya a car to help her with her commute from A to B. He cuts everybody's like gymnastic fees down to help with the finances of all of this. He hires an ACT tutor for her because the U says we need her to hit this mark in her ACTs if she's going to make it.
Yeah.
And Mya, anybody who knows Mya, you meet her and it's like she is smart off the jump. She's just smart. It's like that natural intelligence. She has, she's hyper aware of herself. She's articulate. She is funny. She clearly has like emotional intelligence to boot, right?
Yeah.
But that wasn't working in the classroom.
Okay.
So she needed help with that.
Yep.
She starts getting the help. It starts working immediately. This again goes back to this feeling that I had of like, boy, you wish everybody had this.
Right.
You wish everybody had access. Who struggles in these spaces? So the Zires are working to like, okay, we have all of this help coming in. We're going to make sure that you do it.
Yeah.
And her dad, when Matt Zire, it's like, you kind of tricky. It's like I think they all view themselves as parents. So it's like,
sure.
In his role, he's kind of doing the dad work.
Right.
You've got a car now. You need to put like little things. You need to put gas in the tank. Here's how this works. If you're constantly running on empty, you're going to run out of gas eventually. Like all those little things, right? They come to really care about her. Also, we decided not to go deep into this in the story because I think it took away in a bit. But this was also during COVID-19.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Gosh, yeah.
We had a whole section on COVID in this that we decided I think we need to punt it because it gets too COVID-y.
Right.
Which it might be a weird thing to say, but COVID was an isolating factor in everybody's life in this time.
Yeah.
Maya's first year at the U was like that first COVID year where you're doing sports without like a lot of spectators, you're wearing masks, all this kind of stuff. But because of that, it added an air of isolation to it that was another level.
Right.
It also, as a quick aside, another story that got cut from here that is, there was maybe this is the thing. The story was long as it is, right? You have to cut things.
Of course,
and maybe my favorite story got cut from this story.
Okay.
And it was a story of her graduation party.
High school graduation.
High school graduation.
Yep.
So we're just jumping all over the place. I apologize.
Which must be COVID.
It is.
Like this is like
100% COVID.
Like peak COVID, like 2 months after COVID hits probably.
Peak COVID.
Yeah.
The Zires have been doing this parenting.
Yep.
Maya's biological parents have been on the outside of that.
Okay.
But the work that the Zires did and the work that Brian Howe did gets Mya to the finish line. She graduates from high school. She goes to Chanhassen High School.
Yep.
Shout out my hometown.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. She not only graduates, but she hits her GPA that makes her NCAA eligible.
Okay.
And she hits her ACT.
Nice.
Okay. So the work works.
Yeah.
Everything works for Mya. The first time that the Zires meet Phil Conroy is when she signs her national letter of intent.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So he remembers that moment very vividly. And that was a really key moment for him because, again, he's looking at a male parental figure that's coming into his daughter's life.
Yeah.
And he's wondering a lot about that and having to bury a lot of his own personal feelings about it. He says when he meets them, he said it was like the tension released in his body.
Yeah.
And he just almost instantly just like had this warmth and could feel their warmth. Like even though it comes from a place of tension,
right,
you start to see it, right? They decide to have a graduation party. And the Zires tell me their neighborhood in Chanhassen, they're in Chaska, is like very COVID cautious.
Sure.
No sharing basketballs in the driveway, where are the droplets. I mean, I remember this. Like, I was COVID cautious too.
Washing the groceries.
Yes, no judgment.
Yeah.
He says that it wasn't until like the last minute that they found out that Phil was going to bring a DJ and that it was going to be a party.
Okay.
COVID or not, because I think everybody felt like they had worked so hard to get to this point.
Yeah.
We have to celebrate this big moment in this young girl's life. So they host a COVID party. A bunch of Maya's biological family comes, and it's a party.
Yeah.
There is a DJ in the backyard.
Yeah.
And as Matt said, there was not a mask in sight.
Well, it's outside. I mean, it's at least. But what we knew back then, we had no idea. We weren't even going to the playground.
Yes. So he said it was this very just a fun meeting of the worlds. Okay. So in this space again comes these incremental steps forward in the families coming to know each other.
Okay.
Because again, it had been all of this had been built in disconnect and in spaces where you're working in your own mind, you're building your own narrative about all of the people involved.
Right.
And even if everybody has the best, intentions for what they're doing, that doesn't mean that it just comes naturally. So over a number of months, once Mya gets to the U, these relationships build, and that doesn't mean that it's building straightforward positive, but it means that they're coming to understand and know each other. And it especially starts to happen because when the Zires start going to road meets for Mya, they ask Carrie if she would like to come. And for the two mothers, which I think is where this is like maybe the most intensity in terms of just interpersonal dynamics, they start to really communicate about just their understandings of each other, and not just about Mya, but about who they each are, who they are to each other, and what they want out of this situation, what they were trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
And, both parents were very open about, like, this is an intense space, but it's also one where once they came to understand one another, and Sarah Zire said something about Carrie Conroy that I think is a vulnerable thing to say, which is that she said she did have resentment for her.
Yeah.
She didn't understand initially as a mother, how could this happen? How could you let this kind of thing happen?
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to say, but it's honest, because what, Sarah came to understand over time is what Carrie did is the hardest thing a parent can do.
Yeah.
And in that is a form of courage that is not available to all people.
No.
Not everybody has the willpower to do something like that.
To let go a little bit.
Exactly.
Or a lot in this case.
To let go a lot for the sake of your child.
Right.
Not easy to do.
No.
So anyway, over time they come to understand that, and it ends up being this space where the parents all come to really care about each other, like each other, and to really form this kind of wider concept of a parental unit. Yeah. And to this day, they still all have a role in that. Yeah. And they still all function in that space. And so anyway, I loved this story. I loved reporting this story. It was the story that I had the most anxiety about in my entire life.
Well, sure. It's like you're trying to properly frame this to help make sure you're representing it right. It's complicated. It's a complicated story with feelings more than facts.
Yes,
right?
And it's also like a space where is this a Mya Hooten story? Is it it's like to this moment I don't really know who this story is A1 about. Yeah, it's like I think it's about her, but really I think it's about what it takes to create any individual. I mean, I really mean that. It's like the stew that creates a person in society is unique, and we all look up to certain kinds of people. And I think that Mya is a natural person to look up to, especially if you love gymnastics or you're involved in gymnastics or you are an athlete or you're a college athlete at the U.S. Yeah. It's like she's easy to look up to. And if we just take it at face value, it can seem like, oh, I can't be like that. Like, I can't be like her. How could I be like her? She has all of these things going for her. She's so smart. She's so talented. Look at her charisma. Right. And it's like, that is a simplistic viewpoint that I think a lot of us are fed. And if you start poking away at any individual, you're going to find these kinds of things, the hardships they have to endure, the struggles they've went through. And her story is a really dynamic version of that.
Agree, 100%. It was beautifully told, beautifully photographed.
Oh, man.
Also.
Jeff Wheeler. I watched him work. He's
great. I love Wheels.
Oh, my gosh.
When you said at the beginning how she relates to younger kids, like a lot of those photos really show that dynamic.
Yes. She has a warmth to her that, like I said, you see it instantaneously. Some people just have that. It's like not everybody just has the thing where you walk into a room and, the spotlight drops on them. She just has it. And I think she's become, her coaches at the U told me, it's like it's taken them time to develop her. She has developed dramatically in her time at the U in terms of personally, in terms of her athletic skill, in terms of her relationship to her teammates, what it means to be a good teammate. Because gymnastics is a hyper-individualized sport that is somehow also a team sport. Yeah, everybody stands alone. And so what does it mean to believe in yourself enough that you can care for others as much as you care for yourself. She's learned all of that. And, I think that it's what makes her a special athlete, but it's also what makes her very common, and like everybody else. She's working at that. I once asked her, does this come naturally to you to be positive, to show a good face, to always try to, present? Mm-hmm. And she said, no, it's hard work every day.
Yeah.
That is an effort that individuals make. And I think we all, in some way, shape, or form, maybe do that in our day-to-day life. What person am I going to present despite what might be going on internally with me? So like I said, I couldn't have respected people more in my life because of their willingness to share this very difficult, but I think really beautiful story.
Absolutely. There's no smooth pivot, but while you're here, I want to talk Timberwolves for a minute if we can.
Well, wait, before we go.
Yes, before we go.
Before we segue.
Yes.
It just cannot be stated enough, much like the story of Mya Hooten, how much effort, and I just have to say it again, the vulnerability of these people is a testament to them.
Yes.
This story is their story. It's one of these things, I've talked with my editors about it, I've talked with coworkers about it endlessly, that I was praying to just do it justice, whatever amount of justice. Because it's like, this is not a story that is special because we told it. It's a story that's special because it's special. And we're just the lucky ones that got a chance to try to do it. And so anyway, everybody was just incredibly gracious with their time. They let me bother them over and over again. Our staff, Jeff Wheeler, I was bothering him all of the time.
Yeah, I'm sure,
I felt like a nuisance at times, but I think it came together really well.
It did.
And I'm really grateful that I got a chance to do it. So.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Yeah, just a few minutes of Wolves talk because we trade messages all the time.
Yes, we do.
On the Wolves, and it was bleak for a little while there.
Bleak for you.
If we're talking, if we're doing like the scoreboard watch of the Cat Randall trade and who was getting the better of it, it was pretty bleak for a while. Now it's starting to, it's closer to evening out now. I think the Knicks are still one of the most fun teams in the league, and I would not classify the way the Wolves are winning lately as necessarily fun, but they have at least seemed like they have rediscovered their identity in winning 6 of 7, heading into now this Thursday game against the Knicks, which is not for an NBA title, but sure feels like it's important in the kind of early year scoreboard. And I think it'll be a fun game too at Target Center.
The core difference between you and me in this discussion is that you, I think, processed it more analytically, franchise facing about like what does this mean for the long term, like what kind of tactics are they taking to roster build. And I looked at it as one of the most insulting trades, and I don't mean that from a professional point of view. I mean that from a fan's point of view.
I get it, yeah.
One of the most insulting trades of my life because I simply could not believe that they would take this thing that was so beautiful last year that took the franchise to a place that it hadn't been for decades and just fundamentally alter it in such a dramatic fashion so soon before the season started. And no matter what happens, I think there will always be a part of me that will think this was the wrong decision.
Sure.
It does not matter if they perform better. It wouldn't have mattered if they had – I can watch this team now and have excitement over elements of it and love that we have Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid, and when, Nickeil Alexander-Walker has a good game, I can really appreciate all of the joy that brings me as a fan. But I will always think it was the wrong decision. Yeah. I will always believe that. Nothing will change my mind about it. And that is
not even an NBA title would change
my mind about it. Yes,
that's good stubbornness.
I'm very stubborn on it. And that is because it was just again, it's like how much fun last year was. Even with losing to the Mavericks, I could look back and go, that was up there with probably the 98 Vikings with the most fun, maybe some of those Twins years when they were really cooking.
Yeah.
But the most fun I've ever had as a sports fan in this state. and they fundamentally undermined that joy. They stole it
they
from
stole
me.
The joy.
Very personal.
The Grinches.
Yes. And, you know, as you and I have talked about at length here, I really had a lot of love for Karl Anthony Towns, as a lot of Timberwolves fans did. It's like, and I think even now in retrospect, you know, you look at him over there in New York, and it's like, you know, it's like any great love story. You go, I'm happy for you, babe.
okay.
Like, I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you're doing well.
Right.
I'm pleased to see that somebody loves and cares about you, and that you're leading the league in rebounding, and that you're putting up 20-20s.
Right.
And that you're also, like, I think the trade is going to transform him in a way.
Yeah.
It's like you're seeing him maybe release some of, I don't know, the thoughts that you can control the narrative. He's playing with a really dramatic, fun flair. He's making the social media
these
rounds.
no-look passes.
He's like doing the Globetrotter stuff.
Right.
He's having a little bit of attitude to himself, and I think there's probably a part of him that feels disrespected, as anybody who gets traded does. He's also, I think he played like 46 minutes. Tibbs is going to run this man to the ground, but that's neither here nor there.
It should be noted that in his Timberwolves career, when he was with Tibbs, he never missed a game.
God,
Tibbs
isn't that
was
amazing?
82.
Well,
82
Wiggins
for
was like
Cat.
that too.
Yes, he was.
Yes, they both were very Iron Man-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, all of that to say, do I want the Wolves to succeed? Of course I do.
Of course you do.
Do
But
I
you're
like
still
that their
mad.
defense has come alive and is putting up these incredible defensive ratings against very weak opponents? Yes, I am excited about
Weak
that.
opponents? Like
I would say there's 6 out of 6. It's not like they've been running the gauntlet.
Clippers and Lakers
We'll see how
and
they do
Golden
against
State.
the Mavs. You know, we'll see how they do against the Knicks. You know,
Yes, true.
That's why the Knicks.
they're-
It's a good matchup.
It's a great matchup
Yeah.
because it's like offense against defense because the Knicks are not a good defensive team.
Right.
And that's part of what the trade was.
Yes, of course.
And
But do you look at this right now, even with the upswing of late,
yeah.
and say, oh, the Wolves are an upper echelon Western Conference team?
I don't think they're a play-in team anymore, and I was worried about that for a while. I was worried that they could be a play.
You might be counting your chickens.
But the West is messy, and that
It is.
Here, this is the two things that I think we disagreed on with the trade was one, I'm not a big Cat guy, and you are. I've never been a big Cat guy. No. I think he disappears. I think he's
here we go.
Emotionally unevolved on the court.
On the court.
Off the court, I think he's a great guy.
Yes,
like,
of course.
I think like, and the Chris Hine did a great story on like the group chat of the
Yes.
Wolves, and it even mentioned like they're missing Cat in the group chat because he used to send all the memes. He was the guy that kept it light. I was like, okay, that gave me a little insight into like Cat and his role personality wise, even though you've definitely seen it before. I think if you like injected Tim Connolly and Chris Finch with truth serum. I don't know if such a thing exists. People always say that. Like, where is the truth serum? Show me the truth serum. If you're being honest, there is no truth serum. But if you injected that with them, I think they might say, last year was as good as it's going to get with this group. They didn't believe in this being repeatable, and that's why they made the move when they did. Economics were certainly a part of that, but that's also because you can't go into this like repeater tax, Cat making $50, $60 million with him being that expensive and expect to compete. So they saw this like sliver, this slice where they could do it now, and they did it. But I get where you're coming from in that it feels like the rug was pulled out on this opportunity.
Let's say, I think you and I once talked about this. Let's say that is their reasoning.
Yeah.
That this is the best that it's going to be.
Yeah.
The hubris of that.
That's what they're paid to do.
That's what they're paid to do.
That's what they're paid to do. Oh, yes. Of course.
The hubris to think that we are going to project that this is – because let's say that it is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
You are really staking a claim that you can do better.
Yeah.
Because the Western Conference Finals is a hell of a place to be for a franchise that hasn't been anywhere near it in 20 years.
And they could have won that series.
They could have won that series if games 1 and 2 go a little bit different.
Right.
And I don't think – I think if you injected them with truth serum, I think they would say this is economics. Okay. We are not going to pay this apron. We are not going to go into whatever that's called, the second apron, where it's like the ludicrous amount of money.
Right.
We have ownership, uncertainty right now. We do not know what this is going to look like.
That's problematic.
Yes, it's super problematic. And Cat makes a fortune.
Yes, I was about to make a fortune starting this year.
Yes. And I remember when they traded for Rudy Gobert, I had this – I vocalized it to friends of mine that if this comes down the road and they choose Rudy Gobert over Karl Anthony Towns, I'm going to be incensed.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately what they did. I don't think they'd maybe frame it that way. But I think they said the defense is more important than his offense.
Yeah.
We can build an elite defensive unit without him. we can make up his offense in the aggregate, which they cannot. Their offense does not look good.
No.
It especially doesn't look like it did last year when it was operating at a high level where you felt like they had some of that Spurs, like just ball movement. Okay.
I don't think the offense was that good last year. Like their offensive rating was like 17th last year. It still wasn't very good.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
But
That's fair.
it looked better. It looked better last year.
At times last year, I felt like there were times where I was like, this is just beautiful.
Yes.
So I think that that would be my guess, that they felt like we can build it in the aggregate on the offensive side, and our defensive unit can be better without him.
Right.
And maybe that's showing in these last couple of games where where they're playing really well. But I just go back to, again, to me, sports, and God bless you all who do the hard work of analyzing sports in this way of like just breaking it down as more of a conceptual framework. I'm still an emotional.
You want it to be fun.
Exactly. And I loved the goofiness of Cat and Ant.
Yeah.
I liked the way that Cat was able to play the role that he was playing, which was a really excellent place for him. This secondary role where he got to just be himself on the court. His defense was covered up, which again, it's like that's not his fault. That's a blessing. That's good team building. And so anyway, like I said, I want the best for the Wolves. I just think it's up there with the worst trades I've ever experienced in my life. I'd say the closest thing was Johan Santana, and I understood that more. I understood it more because that was a free agency situation, and that was a financial situation. We're not going to be able to afford this guy. And I'd say it was KG was the exact opposite of this, which was KG, they let him try to the ends of the earth. They waited for it to fall apart, and then they traded him. In this instance, it's like, oh, we've climbed to this beautiful place.
Right.
Are you having fun?
Are you having fun now?
Did you have fun for that 1 month?
Sorry,
Good.
it's over.
Yeah, it's done now. So anyway, I appreciate your point of view, and I think a lot of Wolves, the really great Wolves, I don't know what you want to call it, the press corps that covers this team, very smart, analytical, but also like personal and humane reporting that comes out of this team. I do think that there was a gap in how just much this stole the thunder of a lot of fans. And I think there's a lot of work that has to be done to make it feel like it's similar. Because he was a real emblematic person for this franchise, a franchise player. As much as Ant was taking that mantle, it was like, I think there was still this feeling at times of like Cat still has a real identity that takes over the team at times, for better or worse,
Well, and I think this year you're seeing some of the growth that Edwards still needs to undertake that was maybe being covered up by Cat being here, because he could always lean on him. If he goes 5 for 17, Cat might go 10 for 15, and all of a sudden all is forgiven, like in the leadership stuff, and just being like, now it's unquestioned who is the number one on this team, and it's not quite clear who is the number two on this team, because the concession I will make is that Randall has been a worse fit than I thought he would be.
Yeah, he's been the exact fit I thought he would be, but go ahead.
He's been okay in terms of production. Like, you look at his numbers at the end of the night usually, and it's like, okay, he was 9 for 17. Like, how did that happen? I thought he was not having a great game. Like, he forces them to play stylistically different, though, than the way they were playing, and I don't know what the long term is. If he gets flipped at the deadline, if he goes this summer, I don't think he's a long-term fit here. I think part of this was a emerging belief in Naz Reid and how he is more of the Cat clone than Randall and fits nicely into all of this long-term if they can make that work, although there's no guarantee he stays because he's going to be a free agent as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of it, but I think Randall, I thought he would give, not that he would be a seamless fit, but I probably looked at the numbers more than how they got there, and I was like, oh, it's just like a 1-for-1. It's not been a 1-for-1.
And you know why that is because Randall's a good basketball player, and Cat is a good basketball player, but the difference is Cat on offense, nobody is like him. And that's the thing. There are people like Julius Randle in some capacity, I'm just saying. But Cat, you can't recreate what Cat does offensively because nobody does what Cat does. Even Naz Reid will never do what Cat does because Cat's just too pure of a shooter. And it's why you see him in New York, and it's like, it actually bothers me a little bit because now all of a sudden NBA general, like the general consensus in NBA circles is He's kind of good. It's like, well, he's always been kind of good. He's just had defensive weaknesses, but he's always been a generational offensive talent.
Yes.
Now, who knows where this all goes? But this goes back to what I said earlier.
Right.
I don't care where it goes.
You're mad still.
I'm not mad, but I'm just saying they made their decision.
Right.
They ruined a beautiful thing, and that's all that there is to it, in my opinion. It doesn't, you know what I mean? And that's okay.
Yeah.
You can ruin a beautiful thing.
Right.
But I will never change from that opinion, that they took a beautiful thing and they ruined it. And now they're going to have to build something else that hopefully, keeps the franchise going and successful.
Beautiful adjacent.
Well, and you said they're not a play-in team. We'll see.
I'm not sure they are. I'm less worried that they're a play-in team than I was a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Like I can see the seeds of, the defense can be the identity still. Because before that, they were like lost on both ends of the court.
Yeah.
Before Ant was like, you guys want to know why we're trash?
Yeah.
which was great. Like great for us, great for them to figure that out. But yeah, I think what makes this fascinating is, again, and we'll wrap up here eventually as we approach the 50-minute mark of our conversation. It's like this is definitely gonna be the longest episode of Daily Delivery ever, because unlike your Prince story, I don't have to cut anything. So it's gonna leave us all in. But the thing that we'll never know is how it would have played out if they hadn't made the trade.
Of course.
That you can never know. You can't just go back and say, so like we can speculate. I can say, I think they made a peak last year and that they may have been a conference semifinal team this year, and then they'd be stuck next year with this big tax bill and you can't trade Cat, and now what do you do?
Yeah.
So that's what we don't know. And we'll never know that. So that's, maybe they get to next year and this makes more sense. But to your point, I get it. Like you wanted to see it. You wanted another swing at that joy.
I don't think anybody didn't. I think they made their decision, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Is there any parallels between the Mya Hooten story and this story? No, I don't think so.
No, this is two completely different segments between the same people.
But all that I was going to say is that people make decisions.
People make decisions.
That's the one commonality between the two stories.
People make decisions.
People make decisions.
Yeah. Well, Jeff Day, next time you have a story or just we have to talk about Wolves stuff or anything else, I will gladly have you back on here because this is tons of fun.
I love
always.
Daily D, and I really appreciate you letting me talk about it.
Course.
And I don't even think I did the
Story.
Hooten things justice. It's like, I hope people go and read it.
Yeah, go read it. Please
go read it.
It's still available online and in your Sunday print edition. Jeff Day, appreciate it as always. Let's catch up again soon.
Thanks, Ramball.
Like I said, I told you to brace yourselves, but I hope you enjoyed all of that. Jeff's a great guest. Love having him on. His insights, his thought process. I feel like we have a really good time whenever he's on. Glad he could join me in studio on Monday to make that magic happen. I'm not going to keep you here any longer. We're going to kind of skip the cooler today. Tomorrow's show, more Vikings talk, Vikings poetry, plus Andrew Kramer will be on to break down the film from Vikings versus Bears. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow.